Good morning. Today we will be discussing investigating the impact of nutrition on Black students with mental disorders in the Detroit Public Schools Community District, or DPSCD. So to begin this topic, I started off by investigating it with my own personal experiences with ADHD and seeing the difference between junk foods and nutritional foods had on my mental health. I noticed that when I ate junk foods, I became more emotional and it was hard for me to concentrate versus when I had more nutritional food. And when discussing the topic of what to start off for our research project, I thought this was a discussion I never really saw or heard anyone talking about, even in scholarly topics, and especially not with the Black community and the demographic of the Detroit area. So this led me to start my research question. To what extent does the impact of nutrition have on Black students with mental disorders in the Detroit Public Schools Community District? And so just seeing the difference in the highly populated amount of convenience stores and junk food areas in Detroit versus where to get organic and nutritional foods, and the socioeconomic factors that factor into this component, I decided to investigate this further and compare it versus white communities. The previous findings and part of my literature review of my paper, I decided to compare the impact of nutrition on mental health, and then after that, compare the background of food insecurity and the background of that and how the history leads into Black communities. So to start off, I have my previous findings and the research pertaining to nutrition and mental health as the first part of my lit review. Some defining terms that will be a reoccurring instance in this presentation are ADHD, ASD, and food insecurity. ADHD is the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, and is characterized by a persistent pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity and impulsivity that has a direct negative impact on academic, occupational, or social functioning. ADHD is one of the most common mental disorders and cognitive disorders of teens and young children. This is usually found in schools. ADHD is a prominent factor because it can have distracting inattentiveness for students, which can impair their educational process. ADSD is the autism spectrum disorder, or known as ASD, and constitute a diverse group of conditions characterized by some degree of difficulty with social communication and reciprocal social interaction. And also, one of the background factors of my presentation is food insecurity. And food insecurity just generalizes households who do not have access to sufficient foods and produce. Now, after I investigated this, I noticed that majority of African Americans are the recipient of experiencing food insecurity. So to start off the first half of my literature review, I looked into the nutrition and mental health aspect. From the Indian Journal of Psychiatry, the most common nutritional deficiencies seen in patients with mental disorders are omega-3 fatty acids, B vitamins, minerals, and amino acids that are precursors for neurotransmitters. Now, these nutrients are commonly found in fish, vegetables, beans, and nuts. And this led me to think about those with mental disorders who do not have access to incorporating these foods into their diets. The majority of those who experience food insecurity are Black and brown communities. From this, I decided to add another component to my literature review by investigating the background of food insecurity. Now, with this nutrition and mental health, the patients who omega-3 fatty acids are commonly found in fish, and a lot of most diets in the Black community do not incorporate fish, and or it's hard to find organic fish that was wild caught and would be concentrated in these fatty acids that can help cognitive function. And B vitamins, minerals, and amino acids are all found in nutritional and healthy foods. So if you think about it, that if there's no access to healthy foods, then these people who need these vitamins in order to flourish, if they don't have that, then it would be harder for them to catch up in school. And in the background of food insecurity, comes into the large and substantial wealth gap between black and white people, combined with many socioeconomic factors. Black people are more likely than whites to experience food insecurity, which affects the children in these areas and might affect the students in the DPSCD community. So according to the USDA, in 2021, nearly 20% of black individuals lived in a food insecure household. In addition, black people are almost 3 times as likely to face hunger as white individuals. This is a staggering difference between comparative 20% of the entire country when black people only make up 16% of the population. Financial stability is a huge component of food insecurity, but even when you take out financial security, there's still inherent and systemic racism background of food insecurity, because some cities that are majority black populated, even if they have wealth, there's less food in supermarket areas to shop for in those areas, just because of what these are called are food deserts. And food deserts are when there is little to none areas to shop for sustainable food. And in these areas, these are mostly majority black people. This diagram from Dr. Odoms Young at the university, at the associate professor in the Division of Nutritional Sciences at Cornell University. There are substantial gaps in the wealth of people of color and whites have long existed in the U.S. So from this research from the Pew Research Center, it indicates that the wealth of white households was 13 times the median of black people in the United States. This blue line is black and non-Hispanic people in the U.S., and it shows that it is, and all other white non-Hispanic are down here. And this is around 8 million. 8% of households, and this is 20% of households. So as you can see that there's a large gap between the black and white households in the U.S. that show that they are food insecure. So with the many different components of my research, I thought I was discussing how to start off with my methodology. And even though that there are numbers and statistics within the food insecure aspect, the main focus and the main priority of my research is regarding the nutrition and mental health. So this led me to want to do a qualitative analysis, and similar to a case study, but just focusing on the qualitative facts of my research. So I decided to focus on the Spanish EP-IND INDED project, and also the food insecurity in Detroit. And I was doing qualitative analysis in regards to studying the case study that happened in this Spanish in this project that a group of researchers decided to do to investigate the correlation that mental health had on students and children with ADSD and ADHD. So as I investigated this project, it said that the control group had a higher adherence to the healthy dietary pattern than the ADHD group did, and the inattentive type showed that the lowest adherence was about 45% to the pattern. So in this project, there was a group of researchers. There's a group of researchers that hope to evaluate that in Northeast, the region of Spain, the correlation between the ADHD and the ASD children by examining the dietary guidelines for food consumption compared with the peers without ADHD. They used the Spanish guidelines that have been adhered to all schools to show that the normal amount of food intake for these children. And as they had conversations with the children's parents and interviewed them over several months at a time to see versus compared the children with ADHD to a control group to see the amount of servings per week that they were ingesting and to see if that had any effect on their inattentiveness. And with this the participants' results were put into different food groups such as starch, savory cereals, sweet vegetables, sweets, vegetables, fruits, juice, dairy products, dairy desserts, and protein products. From this, they could see that the children's eating habits were for the children with ADHD were less comprised of nutrition and minerals that we discussed in the beginning, such as fatty acids, B vitamins, and minerals. This article focused on preschoolers aged 3 to 6 years old who are most likely to have the highest amount of symptoms with ADHD and ASD, as some of these mental disorders tend to have less effect over time, or in some cases, in majority cases, adolescence is when ADHD symptoms are highest. And so the behavioral and emotional patterns of ADHD typically present themselves as a young age. And so this is why this preschool at age 3 to 6 was a good idea to study and focus on these children right now. And the ages 3 to 12 are crucial in the development of children, starting school and different emotional factors that can in their home life. So a good diet, it seems to be really imperative to the cognitive function of these children. After I studied and researched the Spanish EPINED project, I decided to compare it to the food insecurity in Detroit to see, in hopes to study my goal of investigating whether the students in the Detroit Community Schools District would benefit from having a healthier diet for the students who have mental disorders. I found that 39% of households are food insecure in Detroit, and 20% of adults are unemployed in Detroit. And there's only 64 full-service grocery stores and in Detroit. And this led me to the 20% of adults unemployed in Detroit was an integral part of my research. That I found that the SNAP program, which is the Support Nutritional Assessment Program, which is part of food benefits and health benefits for all households in Detroit. It has work requirements that require for households to receive the program's benefits. If you have a household who does not have an unemployed person, they will not be able to receive those benefits and not receive monetary income in order to benefit the children in that household who need food and nutrition. Thus, this led me to conclude that if there are 1 in 5, 20% households who do not have adults that are unemployed, then that means that they will not receive the money to come in order to get sufficient food, which leads into using convenience stores such as gas stations and other convenience stores, liquor stores, in order to purchase food for their home, which declines the quality of food, and thus having minerals, vitamins, and everything everyone needs, and not even just people with mental disorders, but everyone needs to function in life. But this can also negatively affect the students in these households with ADHD. And only Detroit has a population of over 600,000, and 64 grocery stores that are widely dispersed is not really enough for any student to be able to accessibly get these foods every week that they need for school. I concluded that from both the study and the food insecurity statistics in Detroit, that both the children from the study and the students in Detroit Public Community District have mental disorders such as ADHD and ASD, and a healthier diet will benefit these students of Detroit Public Schools Community District. I recommend whether this be incorporating, making sure that students are within proximity to a grocery store, and just checking in on these students that have mental disorders and having some type of program to make sure to prioritize these students who have ADHD, ASD, other mental disorders that are not commonly talked about, and such as depression and anxiety disorders, to make sure that food is talked about, as well as having therapy and all other factors that are incorporated within this topic. Some of the limitations that I also found in my study were that there are differences in the food quality in Spain versus Detroit, Michigan, where DPSED is located. Also, the children in the Spanish study were not Black and also younger than those attending the majority of DPSED schools. This may have construed the results that happened within the Spanish project, but the main focus, and also there are time constraints within my project, not having enough time, to really delve into this topic and explore it on a deeper level. But from what I observed from my project was that that children with ADHD and ASD and other mental disorders benefit from having nutritional meals and having the minerals and nutrients extracted from organic foods that they just cannot receive in junk foods. So therefore, children in Black communities need to have access to these foods. The implications of my study are that further this discussion can be wide open to a survey of researchers that can explore the systemic racism within having fewer grocery stores and food deserts in these communities. With this, there can be to lessen the wealth gap and the food insecurity gap between Black and white communities in order to be on the same playing field as our white counterparts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, how did you determine which results generated by your research method were most important in informing your new understanding?
It was hard for me to, there was so much information with the food insecurity aspect. I had to make sure that I prioritized the nutrition and the mental health aspect instead of focusing on the food insecurity as that was a big factor, but my main topic was having the nutrition of these students. So throughout my process, I made sure to incorporate nutrition, and the mental health aspect. And that helped me create the new understanding of the students.
Okay. How do your findings provide directions for future research in the field?
In this field, the two fields that there's food insecurity, so that leads into the World Health Organization and the SNAP program, like I mentioned. And so with this research that I concluded that there's a huge problem that is not often talked about within food insecurity and just mental health of Black people, especially as we are in there's a big health disparity within Black people who are giving mental health help. So with this project, this will help both sides of the tale with the food insecurity and the mental health.
Okay, one more. Think back to your initial curiosity that sparked your research. What other curiosities do you have about how this process prepared, and what other curiosities do you have, and how has this process prepared you to explore them?
My main curiosity that I didn't have time within the time constraints of this project that I wanted to dive into was really the history and how far back of systemic racism goes within the mental health aspect, Black people and their mental health, as mental health is on a rave right now, but it's mostly talked in just white communities. So really getting into mental health in Black communities, and also the systemic food insecurity within which dates all the way back to slavery with food insecurity for Black people. So just really getting into the history of that would be that this project opened me up to, and my curiosity.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.